I'm delighted to introduce the session on scaling up and the county role in housing. This has been a big year for the counties and housing, with reports from the TCPA, the Town Country Planning Association, and Katrina Riddell articulating the role that we as county councils have to play. The Strategic Housing Infrastructure Fund and housing deals have cemented that role, and I'm delighted to welcome Sir Edward Lister, Chairman of Homes England, to this year's conference, particularly after his budget problem meant that he was unable to attend last year because he was stuck with PERDA. The government has made it clear that housing delivery is a priority, and for us as counties, addressing the challenges such as underbounding, housing supply and crucially infrastructure funding are really key. Counties are the strategic authorities able to deliver the additional homes we need, the great jobs we need, and the high quality infrastructure we need. So, as county councils, we look forward to working with Homes England, and on that note, I'd like to welcome Sir Edward.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and thank you for giving me a chance to come along this morning and saying a few words. What I thought I'd do is I'd talk a little bit about our strategic plan, because that is basically our Bible as to what we're doing. And then secondly, relate that to two of your reports, the one you did on housing needs and the one you did on strategic planning, because I think that becomes more relevant if I pull them all together as to the way in which I see us being able to work together. So a little bit about our strategic plan. Why do we need a strategic plan? Well, Homes England is the result of a number of organisations merging together into the old HCA, and then the HCA becoming Homes England. But this isn't about renaming an organisation, it's about changing the culture of an organisation. And that was very important. We are not a regeneration agency. We do not require some of the skill sets we used to have as an organisation. We require financiers, particularly bankers, and land people, because that's our role. That's what we are now about. So it's about shedding the past. We have been busy selling, and some of you have been busy buying some of our industrial estates, some of our commercial enterprises, and we're virtually out of everything that was connected with commercial activity basically in job creation. It's wrong to say we're not interested in job creation. Of course we're interested in job creation, but we're interested in housing and the job creation that goes with housing. We are not going to get sucked into other areas. So that's the first point. Why a strategic plan, though, is because we need ministers to sign off on what we're doing. All of you know how important it is to get an acceptance of your main objectives and get them agreed. And what are objectives? Well, they're very simple. It's about releasing more land to developers who want to make a difference. And by that, I'm talking about housing numbers. We are not besotted with any particular housing category. We don't really, if I'm honest, care what type of housing is produced. What we care about is numbers. What you probably care about is the mix. You probably care about what you want in your Section 106. That's a planning issue. That's for you to decide, not for us. For us, it's about meeting whatever it is that you've put in your local plans and then getting it built as quickly as we possibly can. It's also about boosting housing supply by doing things differently. It's about skills in housing, it's about MMC, it's about innovation, it's about quality, it's about all of those things. And it's ultimately to create a more resilient housing market. And we've got a number of different tools that we can use. The two big ones is our ability to dispose of government land and to buy land, and the second one is our finances. Just dealing with land for a minute, and I'm going to keep coming back to this. We used to be an agency that took certain bits of government land and then got them into the market. We had a funding formula which didn't make a lot of sense, because it sort of said, we gave you, whichever agency you were, whatever your valuation was on the books, and that's it, basically, maybe give you a bit of overage. So the net result of that was you never wanted to give us any land, so the net result is nobody gets rid of any land. And that's what was happening. We've changed all of that. We have MMUs in place with other departments. Our big ones are with the Ministry of Defence. And these MMUs mean that we no longer acquire that land from that department. We will do the master planning, we will do the disposal, we will do everything, and we will take our costs back for having done it, but all the profit in its entirety goes to whoever it is who owned the site in the first place. You might say that's not particularly rocket science. Sorry, that is rocket science in the way we work, because we were never allowed to do it that way. So you can see things have moved on. So we are disposing of government land. And government departments want to dispose of that land because they want the cash. The second piece is that we have very large land funds. We are buying sites. We are in the market. We are going up against land traders. We are going up against all sorts of people as we acquire land, and that is going to accelerate. But having said that, you will not see us normally up against a house builder. That's not where we want to be, because why would we? They want to build homes, that's fine. What we are interested in is the land traders. We're interested in those sites which are stuck for whatever reason, and I'll come back to that. And then on the investment side, we have two big funds. We also deal with HIF, but I'll come back to that in a minute. The two big funds we control are the long-term fund and the short-term fund, and they are what the name implies. The short-term fund is fundamentally SME finance. It is us lending to small developers sufficient monies to get a scheme to the point where they can go to the bank and get the rest of the cash to do it. So we are in effect helping them, people with relatively weak balance sheets, de-risk their activity so that the banks will come in. It's very common in most of your counties that your smaller developers will just about have enough cash in their balance sheet to go out and buy the land option, just enough cash to pay your planning fees, and even that's questionable in some areas, and then they're in difficulty in actually building it out because the amount of cash they need just isn't there in their balance sheet. And that's where we come in and we make those loans. So we are lending in that piece of the market where other lenders won't go. We are taking a much more risky position. So that's the purpose of the short-term fund. And the long-term fund is basically about infrastructure. It is where we're lending money to developers to build out infrastructure to accelerate delivery. Examples, something like, for example, the urban and civic site in Auchenbury, which is maybe known to some of you, which is North Cambridge, or maybe even Huntingdonshire. I'm not quite sure about geography just up there. They've got a big site. They've got a big commercial activity on the site where they're building it out. They've got 4 house builders, all busy building. We've put the finance in to put the infrastructure in to the other end of the site, so you can open up for more house builders, so that you get more house builder flags in the ground. So whatever the market absorption rate, we have just put more players building homes on that site. And there we then take our money back fundamentally by a roof tax. And we use the sort of roof tax formula quite regularly. As the sites build out, we pull our cash back. But again, why would you borrow from us, it is because we will take a greater risk than the bank will take. And our first question when you come and speak to us, well, not that any of you would ever come and speak to us on this, but a developer will come and speak to us, is why can't you get it from the bank? Prove the bank won't lend it to you, or why won't the bank lend it to you? And that's when the conversation starts. We don't even ask you to fill a form in. We ask you to have that conversation with us in the first place, then you fill the form in. Because there's no point in you filling the form in for us to tell you no, because it's pretty complicated paperwork. You better come and chat to us so you can get a yes or a no, and then we start. So that's our big ones. Now, I then want to try and put this into the context of your two reports. The first thing, though, is that in housing, only some 11% of the country actually has development on it. If you actually went to a country like, say, Belgium, it's a far higher percentage. We have a lot, you might not believe it, but quite a lot of green open space, far more than many people. And that is partly our challenge. And the second point is that we are trying to increase our numbers. We've got to get up to the 300,000 number. And there is some science in the 300,000 number, which government talks about. It's very, very simple. Household creation rates vary, of course, but they're circa 150,000. So therefore, if you're going to start making inroads into demand, you've got to go roughly double that. But, and there's a but to it, you've got to build those homes where people want to live. You don't build those homes where necessarily other people want you to build them, but people don't want to go. So it is, I'm afraid, about those areas under the greatest housing pressure. And they're the areas of greatest interest to us. So we are unashamedly in those bits of the market. In your report about the role of county councils in meeting housing needs, building for the future, you raise a number of points. The big one that came through to me was about the importance of local leadership. And I think we totally accept that, and we know that. We're out there in your counties, dealing with your district councils on a regular basis. And I can tell you, there is a world of difference between one authority and another authority. There are parts of the country where to build 2 thatched cottages will probably cause a riot in the council chamber, and there's other places who are quite willing to meet their housing need and are cracking on with it. So we see those two pressures because we're often landholders in those areas. So we are actually having conflict with people. And we notice what happens when there is strong local leaderships, strong chief executives, a strong arrangement, and it all tends to go together. Good, strong local leadership, good officers, they always are in the same authorities. It's so much easier to work in those places. And so we fully accept that, and therefore our thinking's changing. There's some parts of the country we are not interested in going. We will go there if suddenly the Ministry of Defence comes along and says, we've got a nice big site here, let's do something with it. But if we haven't got that, we're not going to go there. We will just bypass them. It's as simple as that. Because we haven't got the resources to do battle. We just haven't got the time. We've got to go where we're wanted. It's about local ambition being frustrated by the skills capacity piece, which you pick up. And again, we recognise that. And that's why we're so into MMC. That's why we are looking at ways in which we can load our tenders much more for land in favour of MMC developments, where we will actually score higher or allow people to score higher with an MMC offer. Because we've got to get new ways of working. We know from the studies we've done that unless we increase immigration, which I don't think is happening anytime soon, and we don't lose any labour back to Europe, we cannot meet the 300,000 number. See, we've got to start doing things differently. Means we've got to start training people. Heaven forbid that we should do that. And we've got to go into different ways of construction. And that's why we see it as being so important, because you get a different type of person willing to go into modern methods of construction operations. I mean, if you go to some of those factories, and some of you have got those factories in your area, they're all at their infancy, they're all new, they're all just about getting going. But the one thing that will hit you is that they're not run by builders. They're run by people from car plants, from Rolls-Royce, from somewhere else. They're factories. They have a totally different mindset. And of course, what they're doing is attracting young people to go and work there who have a different mindset as well. So it's very, very important for us. So we are very supportive of that. And we are willing to put money into MMC. We will encourage it, but we are also investing in it. You talk about the need to, certain places that, within your reports, about the need for long-term holding of some of your assets rather than short-term gains. And I was very struck by people like Surrey County Council's scheme with Places for People, which is building 2,000 homes. This is the kind of thing that we're very into. And I think that's where we can help with some of the policies that we're doing, which should feed into your policies. The big one is with housing associations. We have completely broken away from our old arrangements of just funding housing associations on a program-by-program basis. We're not interested in that. Sorry, by project basis. We're interested in a long-term program with them. We want them to say, we will use our balance sheet and we will build X. We will build Y, market homes as well, because we need to cross-subsidise. But we are committing to this. Give us some money and we'll commit to an even bigger number. And that's the number that we work on. We're not interested in Section 106s. Don't come to us with a Section 106. We're not interested. That's the icing on the cake. That should happen without us getting involved. We want the extra bit. And we've already signed up a number of housing associations. We've done our first 2 lots, 2 waves. We've got another one out for advert at the moment. We'll do another lot after Christmas. And by then, we'll be coming to the end of the journey of the willing. And quite frankly, if people don't want to play, then that's it. The money is largely going to the rest, to the ones that we've got the programs with. And we're helping the smaller housing associations going with bigger ones. We're urging them to actually get together and work together. But we're trying to do that. And that should, I think, help feed into your programs. And then we've got infrastructure investment. We've got some of the funding we've got, which help unlock some of those sites for you. And of course, we can use some of our lending powers to, of course, finance some of these things in addition to HIF, and we can do things in a different way. Your planning one picks up the point about place-based approach, and we are totally in tune with that. And we need clear local plans. We need clear support from the county and then from the districts to be able to move something forward. And you talk about places with ambition and potential for growth, and that's really what I've been talking about as well. So we want to join up. An example, if I may, is in Mid-Sussex, where we have a site down there which ourselves and Mid-Sussex Council have worked on. The land was in the ownership of 3 developers, and there were 8 options. The totality of that lot was that for 10 years, the 3 developers couldn't talk to each other. The option holders couldn't reach any agreement with anybody. And the local community got more and more frustrated because they wanted an assurance that before you stuck the homes in, they were going to get their schools, their roads, the other bits and bobs that quite rightly they wanted. So we've gone in there, we've bought the lot out. We did that in the summer. The first chunk of homes on that site are going out to tender. The first site for the chunk of homes is going out to tender now. So we have already got the first lot on the move. We will gradually work our way through the rest. But that's an example of, in that case, a district authority which has got high ambitions, clearly knows what it's about, has very clear leadership, and we've come in and we're working with them to deliver what we think's important. And then I think a word or two about HIF. There are two bits to HIF, as all of you know. There is the marginal viability funds, and then there's the forward funding. I think I'm probably right in saying everybody here is in the forward funding category. You may get involved in some of the marginal ones, marginal viability ones, perhaps with one of your districts. The marginal viability ones have hit a few problems. We've had quite a few schemes that have come to us for marginal viability, whereby we didn't recognise the marginal viability. We had difficulty with it. Either we thought it was just so unviable nobody would touch it with a barge pole, least of all us, or we thought it was so viable that all that was happening was people were giving a load of cash to a housing developer. So in both of those categories we've had a few difficulties trying to sort them out. The chunk in the middle we've largely moved forward on. The forward funding stuff, which is where all of you are involved, I think has been moving forward pretty steadily. There's meetings between most of your officers and our people. I know that we've now reached a stage where most of the big housing agents, the CBREs, the Savills, the JLLs, the Deloittes, we've pretty well got the whole lot on our payroll. I think we're funding all of them because we've got so many schemes going through the system at the moment. But we are working our way through that lot, and I hope I'm right in saying, although somebody's going to quickly shout at me, I'm sure in a few minutes, that we are gradually bringing those towards a completion, or at least identifying where our problems are and what we need to do. In some cases, we've taken them out of the scheme, we're doing them in a different way, because sometimes there are other ways of doing those things. And then the last thing I really wanted to talk about was a few examples of our new ways of working. In the short-term fund, for example, we've now done a deal with Barclays where we put in £125 million into a fund. They put the rest of it in for make it £1 billion. So it's £1 billion fund. Now, for those of you who know, Barclays were not particularly in the development area. They weren't that interested, not since 2007-8. We've now, by de-risking some of this, we've got another £1 billion in operation. We also have access to all their small business advisors. In another part of our empire, we have the English Cities Fund, which we operate with Lloyds Bank. Very similarly, we're using the Lloyds Bank machine to help us. We're going into JVs with people. Pretty unusual. This is, after all, a Conservative government now taking equity in developers. So there is something that's a little bit different and has changed. And we're doing that to release capacity, particularly where people either have got land that they can't get to market, or we're trying to bring them in from another sector. An example was our announcement with Cllr Living. Cllr is basically a builder rather than a developer. We have now gone in with them with a fund, and we're now, between us, releasing their capacity because we're trying to move a builder into a developer position. Or someone in a completely different with the Home Group up in Newcastle. We've sent up the Innovation Village, which we funded them to do. There they've taken a whole load of different MMC, modern methods of construction products, taking examples of 2 or 3 of each and putting them in a village so that they can learn from those. They can learn, we can learn, everybody can learn. Again, something slightly different. We've done a big loan with St Modwyn recently. St Modwyn is a developer who's got an awful lot of land, more land than they could bring forward. So what we've done is, by coming in with a fund with them, we're now releasing that land into the marketplace and getting it out there. So we're just doing different things. We're disrupting financially, and we're disrupting technology. So those are a little bit about us. I hope that's some help. It is about working with you guys. Several of you have talked to us about individual sites. One or two of you, I think, are talking to us about possible joint ventures together. We are open to anything which produces homes. The type of homes, that's a local planning issue. But what we want to do is produce homes. And the last thing, 217,000 the year before last, 222,000 last year. That is the best numbers since 2007-8, and actually is only marginally off the best numbers in the last 20 years. So numbers are going in the right direction. And they're going in the right direction outside London. London's numbers are dropping. So this is about you guys doing an awful lot more than has ever been done before. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Edward. There's time for a few questions. So, there's hands going up. There's Roy, and I can see Cornelius. So, if we can have a microphone.
Thank you, Roy Perry, Leader, Hampshire County Council. 1 point and 1 question. I began my political career in local government a long, long time ago in Andover, where we had large developments for London County Council overspill. And I think when I got onto the council, the real problem was these rotten houses being built with flat roofs were falling down. And I think it took £10 million then, God knows how much it would take now, to get out of the LCC to put those houses right. So I would just urge one word. Numbers are important, but quality is also important. And we would certainly urge you to make sure that decent houses are being built rather than those that are stoking up problems of the future. My question is, and I didn't hear you speak about it, in the County Council, we're working very hard on developing extra care housing for elderly people, getting folk into housing that will help their needs as they age, but also release the homes, that family homes they've been living in for families to go to buy. Can we hope that Homes England will be helping councils, county councils like us, to develop and promote those schemes for elderly people? Because we've certainly experienced, whilst we're getting on with it, there have been some financial problems. I think the Chancellor of the Exchequer a few years back changed the rent things, and all the financial models started to go into reverse. So that's an area where I think county councils with Homes England could certainly help, and I hope that you would be supportive.
Do you want to take that?
Yeah, certainly. Well, thank you very much. I fully accept your point about quality. You're absolutely right. I mean, all of us can point to those 1960s, 70s estates. And the awful thing is we're now pulling them all down, or we should be pulling them down. We're very conscious that what we do has got to be of the highest quality possible. We do believe that MMC will help this. We do believe that there are different ways of building which can produce more quality, certainly can produce more certainty into the design of the property. You know, it is rather helpful if you do produce something in a factory, you can actually know exactly what's there. So that's one of the things that we're trying to push, and there's no reason why that can't be of really good quality. It's about place. The Housing Minister, Kit Malthouse, I'm sure if he was here making a speech to you, would be talking about quality as being the number 1 issue and then the numbers being the number 2 issue. He, of course, then instructs me to get the numbers. But very conscious of that, and I hope that everything we're touching these days is of that kind of quality, and we're very conscious of it. On the extra care point, I think you raise a really important point. We can do far more through the housing associations. I think we could drive those partnerships more to deliver more older people's accommodation and extra care accommodation. There are funding issues around it, which make it quite difficult for quite a number of housing associations to touch it. I think we do need to do a lot more work between us as to the right way forward. We've been talking ourselves internally about doing some thought leadership work in this area, because I do think there are policy levers which do need to now be implemented, and they're not quite in the right place. And that is an issue for both us and I think for you. But we're very happy to work with you. The only thing I would say is, for us, it's easy to do it through a loan to a housing developer or to do it through a partnership arrangement with a housing association. When we're building out sites, you know, we tend to deal with big sites, not small sites. And a lot of this older people's accommodation, or especially extra care accommodation, is on the smaller sites, which are not the sites we're necessarily going after. So I think there is a bit of a disconnect there which we need to sort out. But we are very happy to talk to anybody here who's got particular projects, and we're very happy to work with you to try and devise ways in which we can do more together.
Yeah. Cornelius.
Yeah, hello. In Cornwall, we're talking a lot about modern methods of construction, but opinions about its viability vary. So if you think there should be a national housing target of 300,000 a year, what proportion of those would you say should be built by, what should we be aiming to achieve in terms of modern methods of construction, in terms of the proportion of those houses? And are you as an organisation actually sort of biased in favour of schemes that deploy modern methods of construction?
Thank you, Cornelius. We're very keen on MMC for the reasons I said earlier. We just don't believe that we can get to the 300,000 number without it. It's just not possible. There aren't enough bricklayers, engineers, you name it, out there to get us to the right number. So we're very keen on that. The trouble is, the whole modern methods agenda is still in its infancy. And there are different types of modern methods. I mean, and there's a lot of questions. Why, for example, in Scotland do we build nearly everything in timber frame, which is it's a particular construction methodology, and in England we don't. The main developers don't like timber frame. They say it's too difficult. MMC, why do certain big house builders not want to touch MMC? And then they, of course, say that they can't deliver the numbers, and we have a different dialogue with them on that point. But the point is, people have started to invest significantly. Legal & General, up in Yorkshire, have got a mammoth factory, which is capable of producing 3,000 homes a year from that factory. But the interesting thing about it, of course, is that they could easily build more factories, because once they've done the engineering, they put it out. And if you actually go there, you'll find it's staffed by Rolls-Royce engineers. People like Top Hat in the East Midlands are in a similar position and have invested many tens of millions of pounds, and I can name some others, and we're ourselves in negotiation with a couple of big overseas ones where we're trying to encourage them to come into the UK with factories. It's all in its infancy. It's about getting a pipeline for these factories. Yeah. None of them are breaking even. They're all spending too much money on their prototypes. They've actually got to get pipelines that really work. And that's what we're trying to help them, and that's the thing that we can help them with. We've got big sites, places like North Stowe in Cambridgeshire, where we're building a new village of 10,000 homes. It's very easy for us to push, 1,000 or so into the MMC category. And that's the sort of thing that we're doing. That's how we're trying to encourage it. And once these factories can move to full production, then I think it starts to really answer the question. They can drive the costs down. All of them have forecasts which show that they can actually produce homes far cheaper than the traditional method, but they need a pipeline to get there. And of course, they can have them all different. It's like a car. You might have an Audi chassis, but the model will change depending upon your needs. As long as they can get the chassis bit right, which is what they're doing, they can actually get it out. But we are also doing other things. I mean things like bathroom pods, kitchen units, all sorts of other things which are factory produced. And we're encouraging that by putting A, investment into them, or B, it's about pipeline. I can't give you an answer about the numbers, but basically the way we believe it should go is that most construction should be MMC, that you do traditional build where you've got small numbers of homes. All the big sites should be MMC.
Martin, I just didn't quite catch you in the light there.
It's hard to see.
So quiet and
Smart.
unobtrusive. Martin Ted, leader of Buckinghamshire. Just one quick comment on what Roy said earlier. I'm old enough to remember when MMC was called Bison Wallframe back in the 70s in London. An absolute and utter disaster, and my council spent a fortune pulling them all down again. So, you know, I think one has to be a little bit cautious about the headlong rush into MMC. You want to make sure the quality is right. My question was about HIF and the forward funding bids. You mentioned Kit Malthouse, and Kit always, whenever I hear him speak, talks about building sustainable places, places where people want to live, places we're proud to build, and so on, and the need for infrastructure to go into these places. And when the forward funding HIF bids were first promulgated, I think everybody was really excited about the prospect of this fund. We were encouraged, I think a lot of other councils were, to put in for this with quite a wide range of infrastructure. And in fact, the guidance we were given was that we wanted this money, the government wanted this money spent quickly. We're finding now, at least my council is, it may be different for others, we are bogged down. This is taking an enormous length of time. We're being asked for incredibly detailed business cases on a site-by-site basis. We have not got the resources, the money, and the staff in-house to produce many of these business cases. We're having to employ people in, consultants, many of the names you mentioned, with money we just don't have. It's taking an inordinate amount of time, and we're missing opportunities to actually put in place key infrastructure. Can you not actually speed this process up? And in particular, can you not actually demodulise it or modulise it so that we can get some aspects of this funding out the door quickly to deliver sites that we need to in a good timescale, rather than having everything as one big batch of money that's taking so long to get through the system?
I think the problem we've got is that basically 4.6 billion was made available very, very quickly. All of you were encouraged to put a bid in. All of you did. And then the MHCLG turned around to us and said, and now process those. So you think you've got staffing problems. We have similar ones at our end, and that is part of the problem. We are trying to do probably too much too quickly. And we're all getting slightly bogged down with it. I mean, there were 71 bids in 45 places. And what we've now done, as you probably know, is shut the fund. We're not taking any more bids. We're just working our way through the 71 that we've got. It is difficult. We have to show good value for money. We have to demonstrate that to the Treasury. We've got a lot of hoops we've got to jump. Are we too bureaucratic? Probably yes. Did we have one standardised system? No, because it all happened a little bit too quickly. Can we learn from this? Yes, of course. And can we make it a bit easier next time? Yes. Can we be clearer about what sort of schemes will stack up? Yes. And we've got to be that way. But at the moment, I think all we can do is just work our way through the 71, which is exactly what we're doing, and just not doing any more until we've got them absolutely sorted. Either we've got them agreed with you, and so we've got the funding in place for them, or we've ditched them, and we move on. And that's really where we are. If there are small things we can do to improve it, yes, we're very open to suggestions, but we have an awful lot of hoops we've got to jump. I mean, we have to get it approved by MHCLG because ultimately it's their scheme, not ours, and then it has to go through Treasury. So you can see there's a big bureaucratic tail to this.
Okay, I can't see any other hands flying up. So thank you very much, and could you please thank Sir Edward in the usual way?